It's about 1:32 a.m. on August 2nd, 2016. I have been meaning to sit down and record the words from this page so that I can listen to them as I do other things. It's a rather long page, so I'll go ahead and get started. This has to do with the Alexander Technique. I'm reading the entry of a writer on a blog site that I frequent, so I'll just go ahead and start from the beginning. I took up the Alexander Technique at the very end of 2002 when I had been getting desperate with rapidly progressing neck and back pain. Attentions of doctor, physiotherapist, and osteopath had been to no avail. I was getting quite frightened at my worsening state. The AT dramatically resolved the problem. I still have a fairly clapped out spine, owing to bad ways I had been using it previously, but with the balance, poise, and general good use that the AT brings me, I get only the occasional temporary pains, small in comparison with what I was suffering previously. However, that was only one of the many benefits that I've gained from the technique, which transformed my life. For example, I learned a much looser, more effort-free method of walking, which made my hiking in wilderness and on mountains much less stressful on the knees and altogether more pleasant and light in feel. I also became much more at peace with myself and better able to be objective in dealing with people and situations rather than just reacting out of any old emotion that might arise. Look at the photo of myself on Ben Nevis and his personal homepage. That light, balance, and poised uprightness of mind when standing in the sharp contrast with the harmful distortions that were my norm before I took up the Alexander Technique, called AT from here on out. And it belies the fact that I still have quite badly worn vertebrae in parts of my back, and particularly neck. Soon after I took up the AT, I taught its basics to a friend in her 70s who was getting desperate and frightened with back and neck pain that no chiropractors or physiotherapists had managed to budge. She too experienced a dramatic improvement and was freed from the physical torment that had threatened to wreck the final part of her life. For those people who are prepared to take charge of their own well-being and are prepared to accept positive change in their lives, I strongly recommend the AT, whether or not they are currently having physical problems. Following a grade 3 tear rupture of my right quadriceps muscle in 2009, I was able to get back into strong walking and indeed strenuous hiking impressively quickly and without reference to a doctor or physiotherapist, because my mode of walking enabled the muscle to work maximal in ways that promoted healing and regeneration, while keeping to an absolute minimum the genuinely harmful stress on it that would have been so much of a problem with the general normal but actually dysfunctional mode of walking. In January 2010, I slipped on ice, falling onto my right side. I was able to establish through inner query that the injury was just a muscle one. Well, actually, it later became evident that there was a non-serious bit of bruising on the side of the rib cage. And I'm going to skip on down here. For those who have openness of outlook and depth of awareness, those who are commonly but misleadingly regarded as spiritually open or simply spiritual, the AT used as a mental discipline to cultivate everyday self-awareness is far better practice than doing much formal meditation. It was the core method that enabled me to cross the threshold of enlightenment in 1997. Never having formally meditated in my life, though actually the daily lie-downs that were part of my application of the AT had been functioning as a particular sort of meditation. Basically, the AT is a true self-actualization, self-realization method rather than a spiritual practice. Virtually all spiritual practices being harmful. See Exit Spirituality, Enter Clear-Mindedness. This guide has grown from some short notes that I wrote in 1993 for DP, the person who I helped learn the technique, and is intended for any other such people to help them get started and see the way ahead a little. It was originally intended to be a supplement to rather than a replacement for the many books that are available on the Alexander Technique. However, I have had reports from people who have actually been using this with partial success as an instructional manual in lieu of taking lessons because the book that I had been recommending had gone out of print, and all other books on the AT that could be found were not practical guides for learning the technique, but instead were instructions aimed at interesting people and going for formal lessons. Introductions, rather. Okay, so however, I have had reports from people who have actually been using this with partial success as an instructional manual in lieu of taking lessons because the book that I had recommended had gone out of print and all other books on AT could be found were not practical guides for learning the technique, but instead were introductions aimed at interesting people and going for formal lessons. This latter point is hardly surprising when you consider that the commercially published books on the AT were almost all written by qualified AT teachers who have a strong financial interest in not encouraging people to learn the technique themselves. Also, a lot of them have been given much indoctrination in their training, so the effect that the AT cannot be learnt except through formal lessons from qualified teachers. In a correspondence on one or two matters in 1994 with the Society of Teachers of the Alexander Technique, STAT, I was actually asked not to call what I was doing or teaching Alexander Technique, apparently because they felt that they owned the AT, and only teachers accredited by them should be allowed to use that name for what they taught. As far as I am concerned, that is just power politics, which looks all the more bizarre in the light of the considerable proportion of fully qualified and indeed STAT qualified AT teachers who actually teach an abomination of the technique because they've learned the physical technique set of rules but not the deeper essence, which is actually a self-actualization process that comes from deep within, not from a set of rules. In this guide, I seek, one, to explain concisely what the Alexander Technique is and undo various popular misunderstandings about it. Two, to give basic practical guidance and tips to anyone who I happen to be helping to learn the technique. Inevitably, other people will find this useful too. In places, I include certain practical insights that are likely to be disapproved of in some quarters because I have the temerity to touch on a few things that are missing from the theory and normal teaching and practice of the technique, as I see it in its broader context as fundamentally and broadly based self-actualization practice, even though it appears to focus on the physical body. Let me warn now that this is not a complete do-it-yourself manual, and even if you were one of the rare people who, like me, are able to take to the AT as a duck takes to water, you would still do best to take at least some lessons to get you started fully on course. In particular, to receive direct physical guidance about your head neck alignment and in using the so-called monkey position. A further informational note, the Mitzvah technique. In web searches, you will most likely see the Alexander Technique and Mitzvah Technique, MT, being listed as though they are synonymous. My very recent brief online exploration suggests to me that the Mitzvah Technique, which is an extension of the AT, is a greatly valuable step forward. Given funds to do so, I would undoubtedly have some mitzvah lessons myself if I could ever find a suitable teacher at any locality. I mean, in or very close to Exeter, UK. And then I would update this guide to cover the MT extension of the AT. The big advantage that I can see in the MT is its cultivating the natural slight rippling motions of the spine and limbs, something that is all too easily largely neglected in the standard AT, and which indeed is an issue for me. I have been long aware of the deficiency of such natural motions in my own body system, and the consequent slight awkwardness and often slight self-conscious stiffness about my seeking to be in optimal alignment and balance, and it looks as though the MT proves to be the missing link. It is very likely, therefore, that if I ever find a suitable local MT teacher and have funds for the lesson, I would then soon be in a position to demote the standard AT to pre-MT in my life and on this site. However, so far I have failed to find any indication of an MT teacher in my area, and an online search suggests to me that there are few MT teachers in the UK altogether. For the time being, I'm stymied over that. What is the Alexander Technique? Question number 1. In a nutshell, it is a mental discipline that enables you to consistently and methodically undo your lifelong accumulation of habits of body misuse. It is more than that too, but it's mainly beliefs and ramifications, and its higher levels of application are assessed through a simple and elegant process of letting go of that body misuse. The misuse includes chronic tensions and slackness of body muscles, overuse and underuse of different parts of the body, and all manner of distorted and unbalanced postures. The misuse involves excessive effort being applied to virtually every movement and even being stationary. All this and more is effectively addressed by the Alexander Technique, AT. It is a whole body technique and cannot be applied to part of the body in isolation. Number 2, some popular misunderstandings. It's a relaxation technique, isn't it? No, not in the accepted sense. From outside, it does indeed often get confused with what are widely known as relaxation techniques, but these do not seek the same goal and are limited in what they can achieve for you. What you gradually achieve by using the AT is not total relaxation in the usual sense, but rather correct and appropriate muscular tone throughout the body. This involves bringing underused muscles back into service just as much as releasing inappropriate tensions. The state that you work towards is one in which all body movements are carried out with the minimum of effort. All parts of the body are not involved in a particular movement, remaining in a state of dynamic balanced rest, to which the whole body and its constituent parts consistently revert when not carrying out any specific movement. This is an alert, positive state, very different from the state of collapse and passivity that is normally understood by relaxation. Although in applying the AT, we keep talking of achieving release, and this usually does involve letting go of excess tensions, the full meaning of release here is release from patterns of habitual interference in the body's poise and functioning. So it needs to be thought of as not equivalent to relaxation in the normal sense. So if we do use the term relaxation or relax within the AT context, it needs to be understood not as an unhealthy collapse with further resultant distortions, but as having or attaining a state of no excess muscle tension and thus having optimal muscle tone. It's about posture, isn't it? Posture is rather a dirty word in the application of the AT. Many a physiotherapist or other medical practitioner will extol to you the importance of good posture, and particularly of if you have any spinal problems, you may well be urged to hold yourself in better postures. I myself was caught on this misunderstanding for years. Holding good postures appeared to control my lower back problems to a moderate extent, but was in fact adding to the long-term problem, no doubt brought forward the onset of my neck trouble, and the postural correction from my neck was very differently harmful. The key to the problem is that when you hold yourself in a specific posture, you are applying further effort and muscular tension to your body to achieve this. Any spinal problem will have arisen from, or at least will be greatly aggravated by, the extant chronic tensions and unbalanced forces extorted on the vertebrate. So additional forces are just what you do not need. When you hold a new correct posture, you either tire of it and collapse again into your old bad ways, or you assimilate the new fixed posture as yet another layer of chronic tension, yet another biomechanical, physiological time bomb, as though you did not have enough of those already. By contrast, the AT concentrates on letting go of the excessive tensions and related distortions that are causing the problem in the first place. It is a weird and wonderful fact of life that as you let go of all the habits of body misuse, your body readily reverts to its much more elegant, balanced, and efficient mode of operation, which you would have experienced as a very young child before the conditioned behavior of adults around you started interfering and caused the buildup of tensions and unawareness. The AT, therefore, is not about postures in the normal sense, but it is about achieving freely moving, balanced, poised states. Even in the AT, many people fall into error by thinking of a good alignment as being effectively a specific position, especially as you are liable to be told that you are in good alignment when you or parts of you are in particular positions, and for convenience you may be given some image of, e.g., what good head neck alignment is like. It is therefore more helpful generally to think of states rather than alignments, which latter would easily become just AT speak for held postures. It's sort of exercises, isn't it? Not really. There are a few procedures you may use that could loosely be called exercises, but the technique does not revolve around exercises in any normally accepted sense. Indeed, the main procedure for which you are likely to set aside time involves lying down, apparently doing nothing. Sometimes people have told me of Alexander Technique exercises that some alternative medicine practitioner had got them or some friend to do for some specific physical problem, throat, neck, back, eyesight, and so on. Let me be quite clear that whatever the efficacy of the exercises, all these people and the practitioners concerned were mistaken in calling these AT exercises, and they were seriously confused as to what the AT is really about. Whatever exercises were used, they were nothing to do with the AT, and constant vigilance is required to spot and eliminate such confusion. Indeed, as the AT is a whole body technique, it cannot be used upon a single part of the body in isolation. Sometimes the cause of confusion is that a therapist has recommended exercises that are thought to be compatible with the AT for specific problems such as back injuries. There are undoubtedly both helpful and harmful exercises, and the helpful ones, though being regarded as compatible with the use of AT, may be mistakenly thought of as part of the AT itself. In this context, it is worth noting that the much valued McKenzie exercises for the back and neck, widely recommended by physiotherapists, are all more or less harmful, especially those for the neck. I myself was using these exercises before I came to the AT, and it was getting me all the more wound up and frightened that my back and neck problems, after a very brief slight improvement, were still quite rapidly increasing despite all my good efforts with those exercises and the associated recommendations of postural correction. It's some sort of meditation then. No, the AT is not a form of meditation in the normally accepted sense, though it is certainly a mental discipline. Far from the detached mental state associated with many sorts of meditation, the AT involves a constant inward monitoring of the state of your body and its parts, the systematically doing the rounds, disallowing habitual tensions and distortions and allowing release and better functioning in each part of the body. It also involves training yourself to attend thoughtfully to the means by which you carry out each activity and intend each movement in your everyday life, instead of simply drifting and reacting on autopilot as people do almost universally. On the other hand, there can be considerably similar On the other hand, there can be considerable similarity with some of the techniques employed in the course of meditation of the more advanced schools of Buddhism, in cases where attention is carefully directed to what is rather than illusory realities or anything esoteric. This is where the importance of an alert observational state of mental clarity and letting go of habitual tendencies in everyday life is emphasized. The practice of mindfulness and non-meditation for users of the AT generally, a feeling of lightness and well-being is commonly generated, with an increasing detachment from tense thoughts and feelings, and a fair number of people do find that long-term application of the AT with no additional belief or meditation brings about an opening up of some degree of deeper awareness. I inadvertently brought myself to cross the threshold of enlightenment through using a very thorough application of the AT in lieu of traditional formal meditation. It's a bit like yoga, isn't it? As with meditation, there are various overlaps of concepts. Indeed, a thorough, thoroughgoing application of the AT could be regarded as a type of yoga. However, although yoga is a really whole class of physical mental disciplines, in the popular eye, it is the physical positions adopted in the Western adopted Hatha yoga that are in people's minds when they try to make comparisons with the AT. And that is where the AT differs fundamentally, because it actively discourages held positions in favor of light and free dynamically balanced states. Indeed, some Hatha yoga positions would be regarded as AT practitioners as positively harmful, at least any that are held for significant periods without letting go and reverting to one's core state of dynamically balanced rest that one would be cultivating with the AT. I've heard that it's very good, but it's very time consuming. Very good, yes, it is in my experience, except that some may well regard that as understatement, but very time consuming. Well, it depends on what you mean by that. The time consuming criticism comes from people who have not understood the nature of the AT. Initially, you would take weekly lessons. Each lesson is about 3/4 of an hour, and you would need to take, say, 20 to 40 minutes per day in lie downs, though you could make some progress with as little as 10 minutes per day. If you're used to rushing through each day on autopilot, you may well wonder where you would find even that much time. But the reality is that when you do start taking the regular lie downs, you find that you function more efficiently for the rest of the time, and it is this way the time set aside is made up. You might also start questioning why you are running around like a scalded cat all the time, and make changes to give yourself more peace and space. What would probably open the AT most to the time-consuming criticism, however, is the fact that the AT is a mental discipline that you learn to use all the time in your everyday life. To an outsider, this can appear to be an unacceptable degree of devotion and commitment. But that perception is based on the mistaken notion that the AT is yet another thing for you to do. In fact, as we shall see, the AT is a discipline of undoing, which involves letting go of habitual movements and responses to situations and attending fully to the means by which we move ourselves and achieve goals. Those who fully take up the AT discover that far from being another time-consuming thing to do, it is simply a better, more efficient, and more enjoyable way of living, with the potential of rich rewards indeed. Who is the AT for? Number 3. Theoretically, everyone. The majority of people take up the AT do so initially because of a physical problem that has come to light, like osteoarthritis, lower back or neck trouble, or other joint pains, or work-related repetitive strain injury problems. Others take it up because of more obviously stress-related problems such as anxiety, insomnia, irritable bowel syndrome, and migraines. And a smaller number of particularly self-aware people, the real wise ones, take it up without the prompting of any obvious physical problems because they understand that the AT is a powerful key to getting much more out of life, both physically and mentally, and minimizing the prospect of all manner of physical problems developing in later life. Nobody is too old or too young or too well to benefit from the AT. Musicians, actors, ballet dancers have particularly severe demands made upon their posture and physical coordination, and people from those professions have always ranked high among the numbers learning the AT. I particularly recommend the AT for dentists and surgeons because of the repeated harmful positions they get into during the course of their work. Even if they cannot improve these positions very much, at least they can learn to return to a dynamically balanced state of rest in good alignment in between times. They would also then understand the AT enough to put many of their patients into it and so reduce the load upon the health services for people using the AT are on average healthier people. That's what I want to be. On the other hand, many people, as an excuse for not taking up the AT, put forward words and then to the effect of, I am already damaged goods, or I am too far gone, I've got a steel pin in my back, or my troubles are because of my legs is longer than the other and nothing can be done about that, or similar. The truth is that for even those people, the AT would give great benefits, for it enables you to get the best use out of what you're actually have, even if it is damaged or malformed. Indeed, my excellent second AT teacher had had a steel pin put in her lower back in the course of problems that caused her to take up the AT in the first place. Also, many people who are told by various practitioners that a small inequity of leg length is the cause or major aggravator of their problems have been incorrectly informed. For the most common cause of such diagnosis is actually a very slight scoliosis, S-shaped lateral bend in the spine, which slightly tilts the pelvis laterally. I myself had this situation with at least one osteopath and two physiotherapists at different times giving me the same story about my supposedly unequal leg lengths, not recognizing that the scoliosis, if indeed they called it that at all, as it was very slight, was the real cause of one of my legs appearing to them to be slightly longer than the other. According to my own understanding, the real cause of such scoliosis is actually almost always something right outside the understanding of the medical profession, and indeed most alternate therapy practitioners too, for it tends to be part of the scared to be here, otherwise unhelpfully known as schizoid character structure, which I explain about in the 5 human character structures, their true significance. Yeah, I guess that one might be next. I don't know. But it can be present as a very partial manifestation of that character structure, so that a fair number of people who do not very obviously show that character structure do still show some perhaps rather subtle elements of it, such as slight scoliosis. The AT cannot do a lot to remove the scoliosis itself, though its grounding effects do help a bit because the scoliosis tends to be a part of a package in which poor grounding is the basic problem. To address that is actually not the great problem that you might expect, even though at the moment vanishingly few people, even healers, even know how to do it. Genuinely effective methods can be found in healing and self-actualization, the safest and quickest way. That's another page. A particular need is for clearance of stored emotional issues and traumas, and in particular the clearance from oneself of attached parasitic lost souls, in which would be the true owners of at least very major problem portions of emotional issues that one is carrying. One is not necessarily aware of these issues, and the dissolution inactivation of any active connection to the primary archetypes that one may be carrying. The easing out of such a scoliosis can cause temporary hip joint pain when walking, and at such times there is just a possibility of medics misdiagnosing this as arthritis. I myself experienced what was apparently this effect in 2007, and the not too troublesome pain when walking disappeared again over a month or two. Theoretically, it is for everyone, but ... In practice, certain common socially ingrained attitudes prevent the vast majority of people from being able to learn or use the technique. For example, most people seem unable to adjust to the very notion of such powerful self-help. They may want AT lessons, but only as therapy that is done to them instead of actually learning to use the AT themselves. Such people will benefit little, if at all. Many other people are so unaware of their habits of misuse or the possibilities of change in their lives even after a series of lessons that they cannot progress with the AT. Usually, however, such people do not seek AT lessons in the first place unless perhaps pressured to do so by a well-meaning but perhaps misguided partner. A common variant of this situation is where a person has some awareness of the need for or possibilities of change in her life, but is simply afraid of letting go of what is familiar. I prefer the devil I already know, thank you very much. Many people who do take lessons make only limited progress and eventually give up the use of the AT because of some of their habitual, rigid ways of perceiving things cause them persistently to misunderstand the technique's basic principles. Despite its elegant simplicity and the best endeavors of excellent AT teachers, such people will usually speak highly of what the AT has done for them, but will have little conception of how much further and in what other ways they can improve if they apply the technique fully for the rest of their lives. As I understand it nowadays, indeed only non-soul people who are only a tiny minority of the human population at large, can integrate the AT fully and effectively into their lives. That is, understanding it properly as a flexibly applied principle rather than taking it on just as a set of rules. Other people's degree of inability to do so is related primarily on their amount of soul programming, or in other words, how far removed they are from the basic healthy no-soul state. However, even in a case of no-soul people, many have direct interferences from the garbage or dark force and various entities which distort their ability to understand the AT and or their motivation to take it on properly. Number 4. How are we misusing our bodies? Since early childhood, to some extent, all of us have built up a large and unedifying collection of interrelated muscular tensions which exert excessive force on the joints of the skeleton. Such excess force is often unbalanced and causes poor alignment of the bones. This is particularly true in the case of the spine. These excess forces in many cases cause premature wear, osteoarthritis, and aggravated joint problems that have arisen for other reasons. Many people are blissfully unaware of these tensions in their own bodies, and the tense muscles interfere with the operation of their other muscles, which become slack and often overextended and more or less unable to carry out their proper function. A good example of this sort of interference caused by tension in the neck, where large muscles running down the neck are normally excessively tense, preventing the operation of small muscles whose task is to keep individual vertebrae in proper alignment and to control the head's position. Thus, paradoxically, more tension there is pulling the vertebrae down upon each other and causing excessive wear. The more likely you are to find that with certain head movements, the vertebrae slop around against each other in an uncontrolled way, causing clicks and crunches because of lack of correct muscle tone in the right areas. Not just tension. The latter example shows an important point in understanding the AT. We are not dealing with tension, but with all sorts of related problems, including chronic slackness of certain muscles. The majority of people have some degree of slackness in their lower backs and a lot of tension in the upper back, shoulder, and neck regions. What the AT works toward is correct and appropriate tone in all the body's muscles. Okay, skipping on forward to the technique itself, how it's done. A central feature of the AT, and indeed continued improvement in your self-usage, is undoing. You train yourself to set aside the tense and limiting concept of doing, because that means end gaining, choosing a goal and then going on autopilot. In other words, using all manner of habitual responses to achieve that goal. You retrain yourself to attend first and foremost to the means by which you achieve each movement, each goal. Of course, you cannot attend consciously all at once to every detail of every single movement you make, but nonetheless, that marks the direction of the changes that you would be allowing to occur. In practice, the most basic things to attend to are allowing muscles in your neck and back to be released from inappropriate tensions, and your spine consequently to be nicely aligned, with your head in a lightly balanced state on top. You learn to pay virtually constant attention to this while going about your everyday life, and it appears to be fundamental to all other improvements that accrue. Primary control. The term primary control is a bit of the AT jargon commonly used to signify the most basic goal that you work towards in learning the AT. Your spine, back plus neck, and shoulders need to be thought of as a single, loosely crucifix-shaped unit, whose state is central to that of all other parts of the body. On the one hand, you concentrate on enabling muscular release and consequent lengthening in the spine and broadening between shoulders, and on the other, you do not allow spine or shoulders to become involved in particular body movements unless it is essential. Most of the time it is not. Your spine and shoulders and associated musculature are thus regarded as being at the core of the dynamically balanced state of rest that your whole body is able to return to after each movement. The foregoing is not meant to signify that the spine and shoulders should be held immobile, but simply that they do not become directly used in the carrying out of particular involuntary movements unless that involvement is essential. In practice, it is really free and balanced body even. Quite a small and peripheral movement will cause involuntary balancing adjustments within the core. So actually quite a lot of very small movements in the core of the spine and shoulders can be regarded as an integral part of that dynamically balanced state of rest. A particularly important element of primary control is the maintaining of a balanced, poised relationship of head and neck. You learn to stop moving your neck about with your head movements, for the head needs to be pivoting and rotating lightly and effortlessly on just the very top of the neck. Your neck, therefore, nearly all the time needs to remain in alignment with the rest of the spine and function as an extension of the back rather than a stalk on which to wag the head. This means undoing your ingrained habits of head movements and learning to allow the head to move freely on its own. This might at first sound like a great restriction on head movement, and indeed some people go wrong in their learning of the AT by fixing their heads in a stiff, relatively immobile semblance of a nicely poised head. You can always check that your head is as free and as mobile as it needs to be by carrying out a spot teeterability test. However, it is fact that the majority of people move their heads about in too gross a way, and once you have saved your neck from all that abuse, your head movements, such as during conversation, will be smaller and more subtle. If you feel that you have to wag your head and neck a lot to express yourself, then that perception is definitely part of the problem that you need to resolve. The head-neck relationship. Forget forward and up. Most books on the AT that I have seen extol the virtues of keeping your head in a forward and up relationship with the spine. This is a good dictum only if you happen to mean the right thing by this, and many people take on board precisely the wrong possible meaning. The very posture that the forward and up direction is supposed to contradict. The most common distortions of the head-neck relationship is to have the neck to some extent protruding forward and the upper part of the head pulled back by a chronic shortening of the long muscles in the back of the neck. As always, little benefit can be gained by just hauling yourself out of this distortion, as a physiotherapist would probably have you do. Actually, in my view, and also on the basis of my listening to the views of other AT practitioners and teachers, the term forward and up, although widely repeated and passed on in AT circles, is best dropped because it causes more confusion than it resolves. As far as to drink. As far as I can ascertain, what was really meant originally by that most unfortunate expression was actually stop drooping your neck and pulling your head back. In other words, it was a matter of stopping doing something that was interfering with your natural state, not trying to haul yourself into a specific position, which could then become just another held posture. Since I like what AT teacher Sandra Riddle had to say on the subject, I recently found that I don't use the term forward and up at all with beginning students or in workshops and classes. It mostly creates confusion and doing. At the moment, I am using variations along the lines of ask the neck to let go of the head, followed by something like so that the head can lead the spine into length. Several students have said they find this clearer and more effective than just saying free the neck. Indeed, I do also. Things to remember then about a healthy neck-back relationship or dynamic alignment are: always think of the head as being loosely poised on top of the neck, not held there. For this purpose, seek the task of the large muscles down the back of the neck as being not to hold the head on, but simply to stop the head from falling forward. Their tension can be released to just before the point at which the head would fall or tilt too much forward. Neck and back are best thought of as a single dynamic unit, which is always gently seeking to lengthen, if only one could let it do so. It is helpful to think of that lengthening continuing out through the top of the head. Very often people suggest that you imagine a length of string gently pulling you up from the crown, the highest point, a little back from the center of the top of your head, and indeed further back than many people realize. I myself have never found the notion of anything external helpful. I simply maintain a certain sense of rising at my crown as a part of the operation of a notional anti-gravity rising through the spine as part of the general lengthening. That rising of the crown implies for most people a usually slightly lower gaze than they were used to. Pre-AT, they can readjust their gaze with their eyes to compensate. It may be sensed also that a slight tilt forward of the head on the top of the neck, the actual pivoting point, being roughly level with the eyes, but more at the back. Very importantly, you do not actually try to achieve or do any extension or lengthening of your spine. You just imagine it. Train yourself to incorporate that into your ongoing self-perception. This, in turn, gradually trains the relevant muscles to bring about what at first you are just visualizing in a healthy and flexible manner, whereas a deliberately done extension would itself be applying effort, tension, and yes, distortions. It is extremely difficult to get the full sense of a healthy neck-back relationship without the direct physical assistance of a good AT teacher. But as you do so, it would be greatly helpful for you to keep in mind that every possible moment during your waking hours, even while lying in bed, so you get used to the new sense of poise and balance. Eventually, this state becomes so familiar that anything else is actually uncomfortable, and you are no longer having to fight the old habit of neck abuse. The usual starting point. One-to-one lessons are usually required, though a very strongly motivated and self-aware person can make quite a lot of progress with the sole assistance of one of the better books on the AT. I know this latter is true because I myself had already made dramatic progress in 3 weeks before my first lesson. It is worth remembering, too, that the AT founder, E.M.F. Alexander, managed without a teacher and indeed without any books on the subject. He had no alternative. Although he was undoubtedly an exceptional person, the assumption widely held at the AT establishment that virtually nobody else would have a similar level of ability to pick up the technique himself is actually unfounded, even though it is clear from real observation that people with such an ability would be few and far between. On the other hand, however well you might pick up the AT from a book, your progress would be hampered by all sorts of misunderstandings and dead ends. Alexander himself did not exactly learn and formulate the technique overnight. He left much to be refined, whereas with suitable books and a good teacher, you can get the best of both worlds and improve much more quickly. An excellent resource for working on your own, and indeed getting the best out of the AT even if you have a teacher, is the AC Self-Study Guide of the Complete Guide to the Alexander Technique website. Without prejudice to all the information I give to that end in this guide, of course. Your teacher, as well as explaining aspects of the technique, will manipulate your neck, head, and your limbs and spinal alignment. The aim is very different from what, say, a chiropractor would do. Here, as far as possible at the time, you let the teacher move the part freely, seeking to set aside any urge to assist or resist the movement or react in any other way. All the movements are very gentle. The teacher is simply giving you the experience of that part of your body moving or being adjusted into better alignment without your habitual interference. Sitting. You will have some of you have some of these manipulations done while sitting on an upright chair and will be adjusted into a lighter, looser, more balanced sitting state. You will be guided through a light and effortless mode of rising from the seated position to standing, and of descending again to the balanced sitting state, standing. Likewise, the teacher will acquaint you with a beautifully light and balanced mode of standing upright. When you start noticing significant release while standing, you will probably be amazed at how much tension throughout your body had been trying to hold you upright, when in reality it had been interfering with your body's inbuilt reflex response that counters the effect of gravity. Paradoxically, through letting those tensions drop away, you not only feel taller, but actually become a little taller. Lying. While lying on your back on a firm surface with your legs drawn up so that your knees are raised and pointed towards the ceiling, you are least liable to be reinforcing the habitual muscular tensions, and the teacher will probably have you at times lying in this way on a therapy table or firm couch, with a suitable thickness of books under your head to rise it to an appropriate height. Again, the teacher will go around and successively move each of your limbs, your shoulders, and your head so that you gain the release that occurs when these parts of your body are moved without your calling into play your habitual interferences. Finding a teacher. Particularly in towns and cities, you can often locate one or more teachers by inquiring at local complementary health centers. Others may come to light because they give adult education courses, so their names appear in your local adult education directory. For the most part, adult education lessons for groups are of limited use, but they can be a means of pinpointing a teacher with whom you consider it worthwhile having proper one-to-one lessons. Others may be located simply by word of mouth. You may not know anyone who has had AT lessons, but anyone who seems to be conversant at all with local alternative therapy facilities may know, even if they have not been involved with the AT themselves. Look also for ads in places like a window or notice board of a whole or health food shop. Other sources of such information may come from musicians and actors, many of whom may already have been having AT lessons themselves. If at all possible, try to get some picture of any teachers you have heard about, getting first-hand accounts of them and their teaching style from people who have had lessons from them. Choice of teacher. Even among fully qualified AT teachers, there are middling and bad ones as well as the good ones, and then if we just consider the good ones, each has his or her own viewpoint and style in applying and teaching the technique. Some will explain things constantly, others will concentrate more on giving lots of tips appropriate to gaining release from your particular misuse patterns, and others will tell you little at all and rely on your gaining body awareness and a sense of lightness from manipulation during the lessons, which they believe would be enough in itself to lead you on in applying the AT in your everyday life. Others may bring in concepts that are not generally regarded as basic to the AT, such as the non-physical aspects, the aura, energy flow, and chakras. It is helpful to be aware of this variety of approaches to AT teaching so that you might choose a teacher with an approach and style with which you can empathize. In general terms, these approaches are not actually wrong per se, though if applied too narrowly and or to the wrong students, each can be limiting. It should be noted, though, that a significant portion of teachers do present serious distortions of the AT. A common one of these will described later under teacher problems. The best way to choose an AT teacher is undoubtedly by use of energy testing, not dowsing or channeling. Generally speaking, the very best AT teachers would be no-soul people, i.e., according to my particular working model of how reincarnation works and how certain differences between people are best explained. For those have the deepest possible awareness and so stand the least likelihood of teaching any distortions of the AT. Otherwise, an AT teacher who is in their first incarnation of their particular soul would probably do, but there would be liable but there would be liable to be subtle distortions in their understanding of the AT, which would make it less effective even though they seem to be doing all the right things. Anyone who has incarnated more times than just once would almost certainly be teaching a significant distortion of the AT, notwithstanding any professional AT teaching qualification, tending to concentrate on following rules and getting things right rather than working on the basis of a flexible, deep understanding. Such information about particular AT teachers can be found out by means of very careful and rigorous energy testing. It would be pointless to ask an AT teacher about their incarnational status, for few or indeed virtually none of them would really know what you were on about, and virtually all of them would be liable to hold wildly incorrect beliefs about reincarnation, probably believing that she is an old soul, which actually none of them would be as far as I can tell. They received wisdom about this among healers, psychics, and mystics being helplessly wrong. Despite appearances, it is a lesson, not a therapy session. Important. There are many people who waste money on going for AT lessons regarding it as a therapy that is done to them. In general, they get little lasting benefit, and indeed, conscientious AT teachers will recognize this sort of thing is happening and gently ask the particular client to discontinue their sessions with them. True, the release you get during a lesson with a good teacher can be dramatic and extremely beneficial, but whether or not the teacher tells you, you then have to take the improved functioning back into your everyday life, allowing yourself to keep getting in touch with and extending these releases and other improvements in body use that you gain in your lesson. Part of that process involves committing yourself to taking daily lie downs. As explained below, if you do this constantly, you will eventually get to the point where you readily allow your state of release to balance to return, and no matter where you are, even for example while standing on a bus queue, you can become completely self-sufficient and the AT completely assimilated into your lifestyle, so that no longer seems to be a special technique, but simply a better and continually improving way of living. In practice, an initial series of perhaps 12 to 20 weekly sessions, just keep them going in the right direction. What can I do at home? Apart from gradually retraining yourself in your body use generally to carry out all tasks and body movements with the minimum of physical effort and a maximum sense of lightness and balance, it is a lying down, as done on the teacher's table or couch, that is the most important thing to set time aside for. Lying down. Probably you would have to lie down on the floor, preferably on a really soft carpet or a firm camping mat, or a bed is very unlikely to be sufficiently flat and firm. A really firm couch might do if long enough. The need is for a flat, firm surface upon which your back can be let down into an undistorted, fully lengthened state. Get your teacher to advise you as to what a suitable thickness of books you need to support your head when lying like this. This depends very much on the individual and will probably reduce somewhat as you progress, particularly if you have a forwardly hunched or drooping upper back to start with. Going down. There are arguments for and against different ways of getting into that lying position. Some people normally get down into a sitting position on the floor, let legs out in front, then allow the back to unfurl onto the floor, using the hands to support the head as it approaches the support. The method of going down is good for building and maintaining strength and a subtle coordination of the back muscles. On the other hand, it can mean that you come to rest with a tensed up neck. Some people therefore prefer to go down in a gentler way that is more or less reverse of what preferred method of getting up. seeking to give minimum work and tension to the back and neck muscles. Whichever method you use to lie down, your overall aim needs to be to arrive on the floor in as released a state as possible, with maximum length in your spine. Thus, while unfurling backwards onto the floor, you should be imagining your back releasing, lengthening, and broadening, so encouraging it to do so. Think of your back spreading out onto the floor as though it were melting butter, or maybe a melting watch in a Salvador Dali painting, or whatever image works best for you at the time. Also, as part of that freeing up, set aside any habitual urge to hold or catch your breath, even for just an instant. Allow yourself to continue breathing as though you were doing absolutely nothing. Once lying there, with your legs loosely straightened but moderately apart, wait perhaps for a minute or two to get in touch with your body in the lying state, and allow release to occur as you feel the force of gravity on all the different parts of your body, allowing each to feel heavy as it is no longer under your control. Then decide to raise one of your knees, so allowing the foot to come closer, but do not actually do it yet. Think of it, and how you will achieve that end with a minimum of effort. If you just went ahead and did it, you would once again operate in a habitual level and probably use all manner of muscles and parts of your body that do not need to be involved at all. The only muscles that you would need to use are those to raise the one upper leg. The one lower leg should be allowed to hang or drag along limply, for the mere raising of the knee will then cause the foot to be drawn towards you. Think of the knee being drawn upwards by a levitational force. When the movement occurs with no interference, it feels deliciously light and effortless. In practice, you would probably find that all sorts of interferences will occur when you actually give your consent for the knee to be raised. For example, various movements and passing tensions may occur in the other leg, and the lower back may well tighten. Most likely your neck might tighten too. Although you need to eliminate these habitual responses, it is important not to allow a sense of failure, because at the moment you cannot stop particular interferences. The truth is that you are firmly on the path of improvement, and that is what counts. Therefore, simply make a mental note of all the unnecessary muscular involvement that has occurred in spite of your best endeavors, and rejoice in the fact that you are already aware of so many things that are going to get better. By remembering all these deficiencies and even noting them down, you will have yardsticks against which to recognize the magnitude of your progress later on. Having raised one knee, go through a similar procedure with the other leg. Some books suggest you should bring your feet as close as possible to your bottom, but I find it better not to be so bunched up, because my leg muscles release more fully when the legs are bent in a slightly easier angle. Before you attend to any fine adjustment of leg position, the next thing you need to attend to is allowing your spine to lengthen as much as it can at this moment. By drawing your legs up, you have now made it possible for the whole of your back and to lower onto the floor if it is able to release sufficiently yet. To assist this process, you need to ease your pelvis forward, i.e. away from your head, or to haul the upper part of your torso away from the lower part, as a teacher would do for you, or both. At this stage, you will find that significant lengthening of the spine occurs, unless you happen to be one of the people whose back happens to be already fixed in a straight shape that lies flat against the floor without any change of shape. In general, until you have some experience, it is best to stick with the easing pelvis forward. Do this with your hands underneath, seeking to minimize any involvement of your shoulders in the movement. I found that after some 9 months, quite concentrated progress, I got additional spine lengthening by following the pelvis adjustment by gently hauling the top of my torso in the other direction, and I still use both methods each time I lie down. If you use the latter of the two methods, you need to be aware that this gives some work to the shoulders and therefore in the long run might be regarded as a bad thing. In any case, it is then important to pay immediate attention to the shoulders to allow them to release as much as they can at the moment. Having allowed what the spine lengthening is able to at this point, you now attend to your legs. Your legs need to be so positioned that they are delicately balanced. Your knees not falling over one way or the other despite not being held up by any muscular tension at all. Ideally, you would have arrived at your present position with the legs already beautifully free and balanced and not held upright at all. But in practice, you would probably have to make adjustments to get the legs into their respective most balanced positions. Check how free a leg is by very gently pushing it sideways with a finger, one way then the other. If it really is in a state of freedom and balance, the movement the knee is moved from the point of balance would start falling over, and you would then have to restore it to its balanced position. The freer your legs are, the more difficult it would seem to find that point of balance where no muscular effort is required to stop your knees falling over. It is nonetheless important to achieve this balanced state and indeed periodically to recheck that you have not started holding the legs in that position. Meanwhile, direct your attention to your neck, the different parts of your back, your shoulders, your chest, and breathing, your jaws, face, abdomen, and successfully each part of each limb, and in fact each other part of your body that happens to come to mind. In every case, you both observe, as far as you can, what is the state of the part you have focused on, and think of it releasing, softening, letting go, or whatever is most appropriate from form of words or image for you just then. Be creative. Attend also to your breathing. After, say, your first round of your body, attend again to your lower back. Unless that area is already very free and always settles immediately onto the floor, you can probably now obtain a little further release and lengthening by running your fingers up and down underneath both sides of your lower back, even if there is no obvious free space there. This is worth repeating at intervals during a lie down until you are sure that it is initiating no further release. Each time you sense any release, assist the lengthening by easing your pelvis a little forward or generally hauling your upper torso away from the pelvis. You can encourage still further release by especially of back and shoulders by a spell of very slow, deep breathing. See the note on breathing. That's another page. If you're one of those with the back already fixed in a straight shape that hugs the floor, then a more extensive and forceful running of your fingers up and down your back should gradually encourage release to occur. Meanwhile, ensure that your neck is not getting at all bunched up and that your head moves outward to take up any lengthening in that region. Let me be clear that what we are aiming for really is not a flat back as much as a free and flexible back, lengthened as far as it will go of its own accord through removal of all excess tension that are habitually shortening it. The healthy, upright human spine has a very slight curvature, so your back in a well-released and fully lengthened state will likewise settle into that residual slight curvature when you become upright. That is true even if your back started off fixed in an obviously straight shape. Remember not to try to make release happen. The need is to simply imagine it occurring with the intent that it be so, and allow that part of your body to take the hint. On any one occasion, you would probably find that noticeable release occurs only in certain parts of your body. Rest assured that it is normal, and whatever little seems to be happening will be paving the way for releases in other parts of your body in due course, bit by bit. In your earliest stages of learning the AT, you may not be aware of anything particular happening at all. This is no cause for concern, for each lie down is still serving its important purpose in that it is preparing the grounding for more tangible releases that will occur later. Books on the AT may give you the impression that you must first of all gain release in the neck before anything else much can happen. That is highly misleading, even though it no doubt works that way for some people. True release in the neck is of fundamental importance, but no two people are the same, and there is no telling which parts of your body will undergo major release. First, in my case, despite considerable neck trouble, which was my initial primary concern, it was my lower back that started really noticeably releasing first, closely followed by my upper back and the first stage of release in my shoulders. Although I quickly learned better to use my neck, really noticeable release of the tense muscles there did not start occurring until 9 months later. 9, there's that number. Having said that, though, I would concur with the books in that once you can allow good release in your neck, that is about the first thing you want to check for release and balance when you are returning yourself to a better state. My back and neck have released now, so I don't need to do the lying down anymore. Oops, no, it's not like that. Because of the interlocking nature of our tensions and other misuses, only so much can be let go of at a time. As we progress with the AT, we find ourselves going through phases of major release in some particular part of the body, followed by possibly a long spell of nothing very obvious happening there, while major releases occur in various other parts. It is often said that tension has been laid on and is removed in progressive layers like the layers of an onion. Another comparison is with a huge tangle of string. At any one position, you can undo only so much at a time, and then you have to undo other parts before returning to that particular bit, and so on. It is a lifelong process. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close this out now because I'm getting a little on the sleepy side. All right. Been about an hour. Peace.